Take a quick look at the introduction of Rabbeinu Bachaya to this parsha. It's always interesting. So he begins always with a verse from Mishlei, the book of Proverbs, Solomon Matchef like Hesef Bakurla Zahav Mocheni Bas Hashem. You use a furnace to smelt silver and gold, but the heart, the one who discerns what's in the heart, is Hashem. So that's a typical type of statement where he'll bring a physical metaphor and then explain how it applies to spiritual things. And just as we're familiar with how to purify metal using a furnace or a forge. So Hashem does the same process in terms of analyzing the purity of the heart. What is the point over here? What's the message? The suggestion that someone is making is that a person should purify his thoughts and try to correct the character traits of his heart. Because the heart is really the central guide for all the rest of the parts of the body, right? Everything, our hands and our feet and every other part of us is guided by the directions of the heart. Like a king residing in the center of the country and overseeing all the inhabitants and all of the civil servants and all of the military personnel, they all answerable to the king. So in the same sense, the heart manages everything in the body. And therefore, King Shlomo points out to us that all the thoughts that are hidden within the heart are revealed to our Creator, to Hashem. He knows what people are thinking. He tests and examines the hearts. Which heart is good, which heart is bad. Just as a metal worker will test the quality of the silver or the gold. Each one has its own special equipment, special oven designed to create the right amount of heat and to filter out the impurities from the noble metal. So to Hashem has his unique ability to discern which heart is complete, perfect, and which heart is deficient. And the analogy to pure silver and pure gold, so a pure heart is like a pure metal. Just as pure silver will ultimately be used to create something of value and something of high quality, a good heart will ultimately lead a person to perform positive actions. A heart that is not good will ultimately lead a person to perform negative actions, just as impure silver won't produce very good implements. Another thing, we talk about Hashem testing the hearts. That Hashem brings people Hashem tests people. A bechina is a test. That aside from the fact that Hashem himself sort of personally tests and examines the human heart to know, as Hashem knows what is in the human heart, Hashem also kind of tests people publicly, meaning he provides circumstances that demonstrate the truth of a person's heart to others. Hashem wants righteous people to be known for their righteousness, and therefore the tests that people experience are sometimes designed so that the world will recognize the greatness of a particular person. As the rabbis say, if you have a person selling pot, right, and he knows that some are good qualities, you ever seen a demonstration, the test our unbreakable combs, whatever it is, so you'll bend it or break it, or the potter will bang on the pot to demonstrate that it's impervious to being hit. It doesn't get dented, it doesn't shatter, but he'll only do that if the pot's really strong, they're really good quality. Right? So that's what Hashem does as well. He doesn't need to test anyone because he knows what's in the person's heart. But sometimes he wants to demonstrate the quality of a person. So obviously, he'll choose the right people that he knows will remain faithful, and he tests them so that the world can see the greatness of these people's hearts. When Hashem tests a righteous person, and the purity of that person's heart becomes evident from the potential into the actual. When people see he actually performs heroic things and shows tremendous greatness, then Hashem's name is sanctified, and the importance of serving Hashem becomes well known. As we say about the testing of Abraham, Hashem tested Abraham, and Abraham performed his greatest of the 10 tests, the Akedah. And the purpose of that was, and there's many different interpretations of the Akedah, but what he says over here, the purpose of the Akedah was to demonstrate to all the importance of serving Hashem. As Hashem said, now I know that you are God-fearing. And what he really meant was, now everyone knows that you're God-fearing. Right? I believe it was Ralbag, a different commentator, says that kind of puts I don't know if it's a different spin or just another nuance on it. He said, people would see or hear about the events of the Akedah and say, Abraham was told to take what's most precious to him in the world, his own son, and to slaughter him, and he does it gladly. What could possibly be more valuable to him in his life that he would gladly give up his son's life and feel happy about doing it? There must be something that we're missing in this picture. There's something that is so precious to Abraham and so valuable that he not only thinks it's a fair trade to give up his son's life, but he does it with joy. What could that be? And it will become evident to people that Abraham's love of Hashem and the relationship that he has with Hashem is so valuable to him that it overshadows even the value he attaches to his own son. And people will say, if that's so precious and so wonderful, I want to have a part of that too. So it will actually attract people. People will say, what is so important to Abraham? And if it's something that's that great, I want some of it also. I read a story once about someone, I think it was in Israel, but obviously a religious Jewish person was, what happened, the story was that a secular Jew who didn't have a background in Yiddishkeit got interested in learning and eventually became Shomer Torah Mitzvos, became an observant Jew, and he later said that what really sparked his journey was that he was walking down the street and there was some kind of inappropriate, I imagine, an advertisement or something immodest on display, and he saw a religious Jew walk by and turn his gaze in the other direction, not to see this inappropriate display. And this other, at that point, secular Jew said to himself, why would a person voluntarily turn away from something that people generally like to look at and brings them pleasure? There must be something in his life that's giving him more pleasure that he feels is more valuable to him. I'd like to know what that is. And that was exactly the same process, on a lower level, but exactly the same idea. And that's what Rabbeinu Machai is saying over here, that it's something which inspires people. And, if anyone's ever read a biography of a great Torah leader, and, the stories can be valuable if they inspire us to want to explore reaching the types of levels that they've reached, or even if we're not equipped to be that, but to understand the extended human potential so that we want to reach something that we haven't reached before. He says, so in a similar vein, what does this do with our parasha? That the great multitude of miracles that were performed for the Jewish people when they left Egypt and went into the desert, it was to test their hearts and to bring them to test them, like the splitting of the sea. The sea didn't split all at once. It just create a path from one side to the other. It split bit by bit. The sea kind of fled before them as they walked forward. And as they traveled, they would see the water in front of them, and the water would gradually recede. As we say in the Hayamra Avayanos, the sea saw and fled. So it was, maybe this is what I was remembering before, it wasn't a freebie. It wasn't like, don't worry, the sea split, now walk across. They had to, each step that they took, they had to proceed forward with the faith and the confidence that the sea would actually keep splitting as they walked. Like, similarly, the way the mud fell from heaven, as we read about in this week's Pasha as well, they got food that rained down from the sky every day. It wasn't like they got a month or two supply at a time. They only got for that day, and they weren't even able to save for when they'd say next, not even as a backup or as a just in case. It was impossible to eat in any food. You had to wake up each morning with the confidence that there would be food coming down from the sky, and if not, you had nothing to eat. And what was it? Why was this needed? Because Hashem wanted to accustom the Jews in trusting Him. Their eyes should, on a daily basis, be turned to heaven, to their Father in heaven, and also to test whether they would question or cast aspersions or have doubts about Hashem's ways. And so too, actually, the first sentence of this week's parasha, when the Jews were sent out of Egypt, from the beginning, the king said, "Leave and don't come back," and they traveled to the desert, and Hashem took them through the desert, test them. Again, they were taking their wives and children out into the frightening wasteland filled with wild beasts, snakes, and scorpions. And instead of taking them to the land of the Philistines, which was a more settled area, I took them to the wilderness. And all of these events, we just had to experience and had to practice faith in Hashem. So that's the idea that Hashem tests the heart of a person, and sometimes it's for the person's own benefit, sometimes it's for the benefit of the world. Hashem wants people to experience these experiences to teach us faith. And he seems to be really moving back and forth in this piece between, and he says himself, the idea of testing oneself and communicating to others. I think the idea is that it's really part of the same process. Whether we're watching somebody else be tested and saying, well, I want to do the same thing, or whether we ourselves are being tested and we're sort of forced to rise to the occasion. Either way, it's a teaching experience. We learn from our own, obviously, the things that we do and the choices that we make elevate us, but also watching other people perform successfully elevates us, and if we take it to heart. And it says that by Abraham Avinu, when he circumcised himself, we know that was at the end of Parshas Lech Lecha, and at the beginning of Parshas Vayera, Hashem appeared to Abraham in the plains of Mamre, which was where Abraham was residing at the time. And as we know, this was the third day after the circumcision, and Hashem paid him a visit because he was sick, and Bikur Cholam, in the midst of visiting the sick. And then we know the rest of the story, the three angels, etc. Why does the Torah mention, why did it happen that Hashem revealed himself to Abraham in the plains of Mamre? So Rashi mentions, without too much elaboration, but based on the Midrash, that Mamre was one of the three friends of Abraham who are mentioned elsewhere, Aner, Eshkol, and Mamre. They were apparently had good friendly relations with him. And of all the three, Mamre was the one who gets the credit for advising Abraham about doing the circumcision, and for that reason he was privileged to have the revelation take place on his property. Now that's obviously a cryptic statement. What was it that Mamre advised Abraham in relation to circumcision? It was a mitzvah that Hashem had given him to circumcise himself. And where did Mamre come in? And moreover, it says, the Midrash elaborates that Aner and Eshkol actually discouraged him. And that seems very hard to understand. They were supposed to be good people and friends of Abraham. So there's different interpretations, as to what the question actually was. But let's say that there was room for discussion and debate even after Hashem's command. Some say that Hashem had given him the circumcision as an optional thing, and he had to decide whether it was really a good idea or not. Hashem couldn't command him, and I guess maybe this is part of the test for him to determine. It says, you can do this, you have to decide if it's the right thing, and Mamre got it right, that it was the right thing. And then Eshkol said, maybe it's not the right thing. Okay. One of the commentators says that the advice of Mamre wasn't about whether to do the circumcision. That was a no-brainer. The advice was how to do it, because it was a question of who should get circumcised first, who should get circumcised last. As we know, the Torah tells us that Abraham's entire household, all the males were circumcised on the same day. His son Yishmael, his servants, whoever was there, and ultimately, the way it happened was that Abraham circumcised himself first, followed by everyone else. And that was Mamre's idea, because the other way to do it would have been for Abraham to circumcise everyone else first and do himself last. There was an obvious reason for that, because after circumcising himself, he could have become incapacitated. I guess he wasn't, or else he was able to delegate and at least to give instructions to people. But certainly, one can see the risk that if he circumcises himself first, he'll be out for the count, and the rest of the circumcisions won't happen or won't go so smoothly. So why did Abraham choose to do himself first, despite that? Those Mamre's idea. Mamre said, "Look, okay. Let me backtrack for a second. I think I misquoted it slightly. What the commentator actually said that Abraham asked Mamre the following question, or maybe he asked all of his friends the following question: how do I win over and convince the members of my household to go along with this plan and circumcise themselves? Hashem gave me the command. I'm obviously going to do it, no question. But how do I convince everyone else to be on board? Mamre suggested, why don't you do it first? And after you do it, they'll see you and they'll follow suit. So what's the point? The point is that if not for that advice, perhaps Abraham would have done it in a different order. And again, this is where it comes in, that one could certainly make the case that Abraham should not be the first one to be circumcised, because if anything, he'll be most effective if he circumcises the other people first and only does himself at the end after everyone else is taken care of. If he does himself first, then there's the risk that he'll become incapacitated and he won't be able to help other people. Yet Mamre felt, look, if you want to get everyone else to do it, the best way to do it is to do it yourself. So here's the point. The point is that Abraham could have used any number of methodologies to try to convince people that they should circumcise themselves. And I guess when he asked his friends what to do, I don't know what he was hoping to hear, but maybe he can give an inspiring speech. Maybe he can have one-on-one conversations. Maybe he can run an advertising campaign. Maybe he can offer an incentive. Who knows? I mean, there's so many things that you can do if you want to win people over. There's so many strategies to do it. What's the one strategy that was given to him by his friends? Well, just do it, and they'll follow suit. Now, again, there is a downside to that. There's a risk to doing it, and yet his friends still thought it was the most effective strategy. But what kind of strategy is that? I mean, he comes and he tells people, Hashem said circumcise ourselves. We're going to do it. I have everything already. I have all the tools here. I have the medical equipment. I'm all ready to do myself, but I want to talk to you before I do myself. I want you guys to be on board too. Well, no, we'll believe it when we see it. Well, you don't think Abraham is serious? You don't think he's going to do it? Why does he physically have to circumcise himself first? And the answer obviously is not because they're not going to believe him unless he does it first, but just seeing him do it, there's an automatic impact on the people who view that and they say, well, he's doing it. And there's a natural tendency to follow suit. We all know this idea of peer pressure. In general, is that we instinctively fall in line and follow suit. The more we see other people doing something, the more we do it. And that's obviously something we're very familiar with. But the insight here is that even something as monumental as circumcising yourself, and you think of what it might take to overcome the hurdle and to convince people to do this, which is obviously not an easy thing to do, and it wasn't at that point as widely accepted as it is today. And if you think about what Abraham had to contend with, all the force that he needed to bring in order to convince people, and at the same time, all the tools that Abraham had at his disposal to be effective. He was the one who was teaching everybody about one God, standing up for his beliefs against the whole world, and having a major impact. When he left to go to Canaan, left Haran, as Hashem told him, leave your family behind and travel to Canaan. He left with a large following of people that were his disciples. So he would say, look, on the one hand, it is a tremendous psychological feat to convince people to actually go ahead with the circumcision. On the other hand, Abraham is the most qualified in terms of a person who has influence and knows how to win people over with his sincerity and his power of speech and his intelligence. And yet, there was no better advice that Mamre could come up with than to say, well, just do it and they'll follow you. So apparently, the impact of just doing the right thing and having other people watch you, even if you can easily convince somebody that you're about to do it, but actually seeing you do it has an impact that is really can't be matched by anything else. So in that sense, when we talk about Hashem testing people, again, Hashem could have told the Jews everything you get from Hashem you get on a daily basis. Maybe they could have spent a week, eating food that fell from heaven, but for 40 years in the desert, they ate food that fell every day, not from one day to the next. It was only each day they got their bread for that day, and they had to walk across the entire Red Sea, and it split bit by bit. Having it split just once wouldn't have done it. They had to have that experience again and again and again, because watching somebody do something. In this case, when we do something, it helps us partly because we watch ourselves do it. We see, I'm doing this. That sends a message. But even if we're watching somebody else do it, it does to some extent send that message. When you watch Abraham do the circumcision, it has an impact. And certainly if you're the one doing it, it certainly has an impact. Sometimes when we do the right thing, even if we have to, but if we see ourselves doing the right thing, then that has an impact on us too. Certainly if we wanted to, and if we're mindful of it, that only deepens these. It says that when Yosef was in prison, and he asked the minister of the Pharaoh, to please remember me. I interpreted your dream. I said you're going to be released and reinstated. Please put in a good word for me to the king. And it says the minister didn't do it. He probably forgot about Yosef. And then one fine day, 2 years later, the Pharaoh had a dream and needed an interpreter, and suddenly the minister remembers. It says he suddenly remembered because I think it's different midrash, and one says that the king was threatening. There was a real fear of what would happen to them if the king didn't find somebody to interpret their dreams. Maybe he wanted a reward for finding the interpretation. For his own motive at that point, he thought it would be advantageous to call for the king's attention, as there was this very talented dream interpreter in the prison. So at that point, he suddenly remembers that 2 years ago there was this young Hebrew slave in the prison who was good at interpreting dreams, and the king summons Yosef, and of course we know the rest is history. So Rashi says, according to Midrash, the cursed are the wicked, their goodness is never complete. Here you see that the minister is finally doing the right thing. He's telling the king about Yosef, and yet, what does he call him? A young Hebrew slave. He doesn't want to give Yosef any leg up in getting a promotion. So he makes sure, while he's telling the king about all Yosef's qualifications, making sure to put in all the disqualifiers of why Yosef isn't really suitable for any kind of position, because he's a Hebrew, he's a slave, he's a kid, and just to make sure the king doesn't get any ideas into his head. Okay, fine. We understand that. This minister was not a good person. He has no interest in helping Yosef, and everything he's doing is self-serving, and he even makes sure to knock Yosef down while he's doing it. Okay, so that's understandable. Why do you criticize him by saying that wicked people never do anything completely good? If you wanted to criticize him, the appropriate criticism is to say he's a wicked person who's selfish, doesn't want to help Yosef, and is actually trying to hurt Yosef. The only thing that he actually does that's positive is that he tells the king Yosef can interpret dreams. And the only reason he does that is to save his own skin. And he does everything possible to make it as unhelpful to Yosef as possible. So he's a wicked person who doesn't do anything good. If you have a Nazi war criminal, I mean, that's more extreme than this, but if you have a Nazi war criminal at the end of the war, he says, he tries to get on people's good side, so he shouldn't be prosecuted. But he doesn't do such a great job because he's still, a wicked person. You don't say, well, his goodness isn't complete. You would say, well, he's a wicked person. To save his own skin, he's trying to get on people's good side by pretending to be a decent citizen, but we all know the truth. That's essentially what's happening over here. So what's the message? So it would seem, from reading what Rashi is telling us, what the Chazal is telling us, is that, look, wicked people don't do completely good things. Right? What was good about what the minister was doing? What was good was that he was helping Yosef. Why was he helping Yosef? For a totally selfish reason. But that doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter because when someone does something good, and we all are sometimes forced into doing good things, despite our wishes otherwise, the average person or a decent person will say, if we're doing something good, I'd like to do it right. And we all know people like that, people who aren't necessarily wonderful people or are paragons of virtue, but if it's a plumber or if it's an electrician or if it's an accountant or whoever it is, they do their job well. They take pride in their job well done. And if you call them, maybe they won't do you a favor, or maybe they'll charge you an arm and a leg, but if they're going to fix your pipes, they'll fix it right and they'll make sure to come back. Not everyone will do that. Certainly lots of people won't, but there's a decent person who will stand by their work. I will want to at least, if I have to help you, for whatever reason, maybe I have to help you because it's my job, maybe I have to help you because of social pressure, but at least I want to help you, and at least I want to do it right. And the idea is that I think that a decent person, he had no interest in helping Yosef. Maybe he doesn't like Yosef, maybe he doesn't want Yosef to be promoted. But if he has to help him, if he has to, out of self-serving motives, give Yosef's name to the king, he could have the decency to just put in a good word for him and feel happy that at least he's helping Yosef out. Despite his own misgivings and despite maybe his own jealousy and his own fear that Yosef will be promoted and superseded, whatever the reasons are, he could get over it and he could do it right. But this guy, while he's in the middle of helping Yosef and while he's in the middle of telling the king Yosef's count, he has to stick in some negative words. And that's another level of wickedness, and that's really the point that's being made here. The fact that he didn't remember Yosef for 2 years, Yosef asked for help and he wouldn't help him, and he wasn't grateful to Yosef for interpreting his dream. Okay, so that's wickedness. But now that you actually are helping him and you can't help him, no matter how wicked you are, there's a part of human nature that when you're forced to do something good, there's a tendency to just do it right. At least with the good things that I do should be good. And sort of to fight that natural tendency to, in the midst of doing something that's good, and to do it badly, is a particular form of wickedness that deserves special mention. The lesson is that for us as well, that we're not perfect in every regard, and we don't do everything right, but we do some things right. We choose to do the right thing, hopefully on many occasions. But even when we don't choose to do the right thing, there are times when we find ourselves doing the right thing by default because we have to, because I would be embarrassed not to if everyone else is doing it. But that's an opportunity, because when we do the right thing, for any reason, we teach ourselves something. Even watching somebody else do the right thing teaches us something. Certainly when we watch ourselves do the right thing, even if the one's not really do. But watching ourselves do the act, and that happens. In fact, even the minister of Pharaoh, he saw himself helping Yosef, which was absolutely not the person who he was, and absolutely not what he wanted to do. But once he's doing it, he might learn from that and do it right. And if he didn't, we call him an evil person, because why can't you learn from your own actions and do what you're doing and do it well? So there's a force, and it's a helpful force that we can channel in our lives. And when we experience it, whether it's intentional or even unintentional or even involuntary, but you say, let's focus on that. A lot of it is about focusing, just as the experience of crossing the Red Sea itself. What do you get out of it? What depends what you focus on. We can make the conscious choice to say, I did this, I see that I can do this, somebody else did this, I see that somebody can do this, let's do more of that. Let's reinforce that. Let's use that as a learning experience, because everything in life has to be a learning experience. So, on that note, that's a good way to sign off, I guess. I wish everyone a week of learning experiences, positive experiences that we can grow from, that will be uplifting, hopefully, if all goes well. We'll speak again next week. Until then, I want to thank you for tuning in. I wish you a wonderful week.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you, Rabbi.